Welcome back to the Redacted Tapes. Today we're covering one of the darkest and least understood chapters in North American history. For more than a century, the governments of both the United States and Canada operated policies designed to remove Indigenous children from their families and assimilate them into European society. Hundreds of thousands of children were taken from their homes and placed in boarding schools or residential schools where they were forbidden from speaking their languages, practicing their traditions, or maintaining connections to their culture. Many experienced physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. Thousands never returned home. This episode explores how these systems were created, why governments supported them, and what happened inside those schools, and why their legacy is still felt today. Let's dive into it. To understand these schools, we first need to understand the idea behind them. Throughout the 1800s and much of the 1900s, many government officials believed Indigenous people should abandon their cultures and become part of the mainstream European society, rather than recognizing Indigenous nations as distinct peoples with their own languages, religions, and governments. Policymakers viewed assimilation as a solution to what they called the Indian problem. Children became the primary focus, because officials believed separating from their families would break the transmission of the Indigenous culture from one generation to the next.
Early 70s took me to the boarding school where I wasn't allowed to talk my native tongue or practice my native ways. Numerous times they'd put on this big huge white cone, put on there, it says dunce. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know English. They put it on me, make me wear it all over. Kids would laugh at me. They took me away from all of that and punished me for talking that. It was my first language. I didn't know any other language. So whenever I talk, it came out. Cree would come out, and whenever I talk, I get hit. I got hit so much I lost my tongue. I lost my native tongue. The only thing I remember was my Indian name. Which is Senukiyu, means old man eagle. That's the only Cree I knew. They beat me. Every day, they beat me. They cut off my hair, made me kneel in front of the door where everybody come in. Everybody make fun of me when they come by me, rub my head and laugh at me. Because I was talking. They caught me talking. I hope someday somebody will hear me. I hope nobody has to go through this. We have to have our own language. Because what we do when we talk to our spirits, they don't understand English. to look at you, you'll be talking English. What are you saying? Tanseh tueng. Tansimagay tueng. Nobody's saying that in Cree. Like now you didn't know what I just said. That was a hard time in my life. I'll always remember it. For that white man, it's a terrible shame for him to be treating people like this. Because we are a people. We just need to be accepted.
One of the best known figures behind this movement was Richard Henry Pratt, founder of the Carlisle Indian Industrial School in Pennsylvania. His infamous phrase was, "Kill the Indian, save the man." The phrase reflected a goal of eliminating indigenous identity throughout forced assimilation. Beginning in the late 1800s, the United States government established a nationwide system of Indian boarding schools. Eventually, more than 400 federal boarding schools operated across the country. Children from hundreds of tribes were taken, sometimes voluntarily under pressure or often coercion, in many cases by force. Many traveled hundreds or even thousands of miles from home. Once they arrived, everything changed. Their hair was cut, traditional clothing was taken away, native names were replaced with English names, speaking indigenous languages was forbidden. Children caught practicing in ceremonial or speaking their language could face punishment.
It was my first haircut. I cried when I saw my hair on the floor. Tears still well up in my eyes when I remember the way it laid on the floor. Without my Navajo language, I was broken and unable to celebrate my heritage, to express myself. Taking my identity from me made me very powerless.
I managed to learn how to stuff all the the loneliness that came because I could not talk to my mother or my father. And we were not comforted by the boarding school matrons or teachers. The pain and the loneliness and the anger will always be with me.
The schools often followed military-style discipline. Many students spent long hours farming, cooking, cleaning, sewing, instead of receiving a full academic education. Disease, overcrowding, poor nutrition, and inadequate medical care were common. Many children died while attending these schools and were buried far from their families.
The shocking discoveries of several hundred unmarked graves at former boarding schools for Indigenous children in Western Canada has focused attention on a dark chapter of that nation's history. As John Yang reports, it is a story of forced assimilation and physical, emotional, and sexual abuse.
Judy, for more than a century, the children of Canadian Native communities, including what's known as the First Nations, were taken from their families and sent to Christian boarding schools run for the government, about 70% of them run by the Catholic Church. An estimated 150,000 children passed through these schools before they were closed in 1996. They were banned from speaking their languages or practicing their traditions. Children died and their families were never told, their bodies never returned.
Canada developed a similar system from the 1880s up until the last federally run residential school closed in 1997. Approximately 150,000 First Nations, Inuit, and Métis children attended residential schools. Most were operated by Christian churches while being funded by the federal government. Children were separated from siblings and parents. They were expected to abandon their languages and cultural traditions. Many survivors describe harsh punishments for speaking their language or practicing their culture. Numerous survivors also reported physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, forced labor, hunger, and neglect. In 2015, Canada's Truth and Reconciliation Commission concluded that the residential school system constituted a cultural genocide. In 2021, First Nations announced discovering of potential unmarked graves at several former residential schools using ground-penetrating radar. The announcements drew worldwide attention.
We're joined by Washington Post reporter Dana Hedgepeth, who was part of the team that reported this story and is a member of the Halawasaponi tribe of North Carolina. Thank you so much for joining us. Can you help our viewers understand the scope of the abuse that you uncovered?
This is a very important topic, and there's been a lot of work already done on this. We hope to move the ball forward and shed new light on it. And what we found in our investigation gave new details about the level of sexual abuse that was done by Catholic priests, sisters, and brothers from the 1800s to the 1900s at schools. Most of the abuse occurred in the 1950s and 60s and involved 1,000 children, and experts like Deb Parker and others believe that that is really only the tip of the iceberg, that the abuse was more widespread, deeper than probably we found, but documents are inconsistent and incomplete. So that is what we found in our investigation.
These findings reminded many people that countless families never learned what happened to their children. Investigations continue at many former school sites, and not every detected anomaly has been excavated or confirmed as a grave. For many survivors and Indigenous communities, these investigations are part of the broader effort to uncover the truth and identify those who never returned home. The effects of these schools did not end when they closed. Many survivors returned home unable to speak their own language. Some had lost connections to their family, traditions, and ceremonies. Communities experienced generations of interrupted parenting, cultural loss, and trauma. Today, Indigenous communities continue to rebuild languages, preserve traditions, and support survivors and their descendants. These efforts are often described as acts of resilience and cultural revitalization.
I remember this person telling me that any of the boys in his particular dormitory floor who were not circumcised yet at that point, without being told, were marched over to the infirmary, and if they weren't circumcised by then, they were circumcised, and if they didn't have their tonsils out by then, they had their tonsils removed. And I just couldn't imagine from his story how this could take place, number one.
In Canada, the federal government issued a formal apology in 2008. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission documented thousands of survivors' testimonies and made 94 calls to action aimed at addressing the legacy of residential schools.
The government now recognizes that the consequences of the Indian residential schools policy were profoundly negative, and that this policy has had a lasting and damaging impact on Aboriginal culture, heritage, and language. The absence of an apology has been an impediment to healing and reconciliation. Therefore, on behalf of the Government of Canada and all Canadians, I stand before you in this chamber so vital, so central to our existence as a country, to apologize to Aboriginal peoples for the role the Government of Canada played in the Indian residential schools system.
In the United States, the Department of the Interior launched the Federal Indian Boarding School Initiative in 2021. Its investigations documented the scope of the boarding school system and identified hundreds of known children deaths, while acknowledging that their true number is likely much higher because many records are incomplete. In 2024, President Joe Biden formally apologized for the federal government's role in the boarding school system.
Generations of Native children stolen, taken away to places they didn't know, with people they never met, who spoke a language they had never heard. Native communities silenced. Their children's laughter and play were gone. Children would arrive at schools, their clothes taken off, their hair that they were told was sacred was chopped off, their names literally erased, replaced by a number or an English name. After 150 years, the United States government eventually stopped the program. But the federal government has never formally apologized for what happened until today. I formally apologize as President of the United States of America. Native Americans, Native Hawaiians, Native Alaskans, and federal Indian boarding schools. It's long overdue.
The history of Indigenous boarding schools is not just a story about the past. Its effects are still present in many Indigenous communities today. Understanding this history means recognizing both harm caused by these policies and the resilience of the people who survived them. As more records are uncovered and more survivor stories are shared, historians and communities continue to work towards a fuller understanding of what happened. As we wrap up today's episode, it's important to remember that history isn't just about dates and events. It's about people. The story of Indigenous boarding schools and residential schools is one of immense loss, but it's also a story of resilience. Despite generations of efforts to erase Indigenous languages, culture, and identities, those communities continue to preserve their traditions, revitalize their languages, and share their histories. Our goal in this episode was to explore this chapter of history through documented evidence, historical research, and recognizing the experience of survivors while encouraging listeners to learn more about this topic. If you found this episode informative, be sure to subscribe. You don't want to miss future deep dives into history, forgotten stories, mysteries, and the unexplained. If there's a topic you'd like us to cover next, let us know in the comments or send us a message. Until next time, keep asking questions, and remember, understanding the past helps us better understand the present. This was Redacted Tapes.